All right, top podcast number 2 for 2024, which is how to sell in a hard market. So many areas, some of the markets are very tight and closed. This is causing a difference in sales. Now, the good news is premiums are higher. So there is a little bit of a balance and rub there. Ultimately, what you want to do is think about this. You've got two roles in a hard market, right? You've got to get a database for when the market changes so that you're storing up leads like you're a little, squirrel coming into hibernation. And two, the good leads that you have to hop on quick, you have to pre-underwrite, and you have to make moves on. And you have to make sure you're multi-lining them as much as possible because those leads are super, super, super valuable. We are seeing more and more people switching agencies because they're frustrated with service. So because people are paying more, their expectations are higher. Make sure on the back end, you're still serving and loving your customer. So let's talk about how to go ahead and sell in a hard market, our number 2 podcast, 2024.
We have to get those submissions right. We have to know what we're targeting. We have to know who our client is.
We've got to get the word out there that we are insurance agents, that we're knowledgeable, we can answer their questions.
I think we just have to look at what are some new ways to do business, but still keep that personal touch.
But I can control how many conversations I have. I can control who I'm having conversations with. And I can put myself out there in a different way. All right, guys. So obviously, new business sales is dramatic today. We have lots and lots and lots of new hoops to jump through, from carriers not being in raters, so quoting needs to be a lot more efficient and effective, to some carriers just saying no new business, to new business being very, very, very well qualified. In DC, we're the conference I just came back from, they were talking about we don't just have an affordability, we have an accessibility crisis in insurance, where there are just some people that don't have access to affordable insurance or some version of affordable. Like if you're in the wildfire zones in California or Florida, it's just it spiked so quickly that people are not digesting it, or it's very, very difficult to get if it's not on the state fair plan. So new business has become an interesting yet dynamic challenge. And I think that, when the phone was ringing, you could take leads and convert them. Agencies were happy, and now we have to kind of reinvent ourselves, right? So when we're thinking about new business sales in insurance, what are some of the tips and tricks you guys are giving agencies right now on how to, still maintain your business? And for me, the biggest conversation we should have here today is how do we keep producers happy, right? Because the last thing I think we want to see is producers exit and go sell cars or something, because it's like, hey, this was great, but I'm just not able to hit my sales goals. And it is partial due to market conditions, right? And I'll just say quickly, we have a group of producers I work with, and they're really good producers. They target mid to large commercial. So like their prospecting life cycle is long, right? Like they've been prospecting some of these accounts for 3 years, and they're not bad accounts, but now they're coming through and no carriers want them. And what that does to a producer who's been like just grinding it out, like those larger accounts, you can't just pivot on a dime necessarily and say, oh, underwriting's here now. Like that's not exactly the way it works. And so what's some guidelines and instructions you guys are giving your clients on how do we do it?
I think you have to
keep selling insurance
like a niche market, right? Like how would you approach building out a niche market at this point? Because our carriers are only taking what they're taking. And I think Stephen mentioned this in kind of a prior podcast, which was, we need to know, where is the market? And, Teresa's really good about talking about having our discounts, having our endorsements, knowing what those things are, and then training our staff to know, and having really great relationships with our underwriters so that we know what we can send them. And when we are sending new business to carriers, we need to be sending nice, clean, tidy underwriting files. Do not send crap, because guess what's not going to float to the top of their deck is your submission. So we have to get those submissions right. We have to know what we're targeting. We have to know who our client is so that we can be most effective in our sales strategy.
I think that's where we got in trouble. I think when I started writing insurance, we were just writing everything because we just wanted new business. Right. Were we looking at those risks? And then the carriers started saying, okay, now you have to go out and take pictures. So then when we started going out and take pictures, then we're like, oh, this makes sense. We can't insure this. I think right now we're at a point where we have got to know our risks. One of the suggestions I have for sales is networking. Network. The more you get out there in your community, chamber of commerce, and the different organizations that are in your town, you get to know people. And don't go and do that and not tell them that you're an insurance agent. Because I know somebody in another agency I worked for who was really popular in the town. And I did an event in downtown where she was actually working, and she knows who she is if she's listening to this. And I was like, I work with so-and-so, and she's an insurance agent. And they're like, she's an insurance agent? And I'm like, yeah. And she was really popular. Everybody knows who she is, but they had no idea that she was, and she used to be the owner. And the agency I was with purchased her agency. So she really had skin in the game when it came to the insurance agency. So make sure people know that you're an insurance agent, but don't, obviously make it slimy. If they have an insurance question, then let them know that they can come to you with their questions. And eventually you'll end up writing their business, because once you start answering their questions, they realize, oh, she really is a really good insurance agent. And I really think I'd like to have my insurance with her because she's going to take care of me. So we've got to show that we care. We've got to get the word out there that we are insurance agents, that we're knowledgeable, we can answer their questions. And they don't have to have a policy with us to answer those questions. We can answer them. And eventually one thing leads to another. And when their renewal comes up, they think of you. So think about those aspects when it comes to sales and how you can. And some people don't like to insure friends and family, and I get it. But you definitely want to network and make sure that people know that you're an agent. I used to, at lunchtime, I worked in a downtown area. I would walk downtown at lunch and just pass out my business card. And I wasn't pushy. I would just say, hey, I'm right down the street. If you have an insurance question, give me a call. Was it successful? Probably not 100%, but I met a lot of people. I'm sure I wrote some policies from it, but you've got to have a strategy. You've got to have a way to do it. And if you don't like to call, then get out there, network.
One of the things I did with the agency the other day is I sent the producers in and I said, who's your ideal client? Right? Like, who is the perfect person that you could place 9 out of 10 times? And one of them looks at me and goes, well, they'd have to have a home, an auto, and an umbrella, and a life policy. I'm like, okay, so we believe in the foreign score or the package. Great. Love it. So if I have a $130,000 single wide mobile home with a DUI and I'm willing to get a life quote, I'm your ideal client. And they're like, well, no. I'm like, well, you just told me if I own a home and I have a car and I'm willing to talk about an umbrella and life, then I'm your ideal client. I'm like, but that's not what I meant. And I'm like, okay, so paint a clearer picture for me. I need to understand what I can go find you that 9 times out of 10 you can place. And he's like, well, like maybe like a $400,000 house. And I'm like, okay, so is that a moderately priced home in your area? And he's like, yeah, it's not a starter home, but it's not a high-end home. And I'm like, okay. He goes, and maybe 2 to 3 vehicles, married, maybe a kid or 2. I'm like, okay, we're getting closer. Like, we're painting a better picture. I'm like, what does their driving record look like? Well, most of our carriers, they have to have a clear record. I'm like, okay, so we should probably write that down. So as we started working through the conversation, he was painting his own picture. I'm like, so if I call with the single wide and the DUI, what are you going to tell me? He's like, well, then I probably don't have the best market for you. I'm like, but 10 minutes ago, you were ready to bounce all over it because I had a car and a home and I was ready to listen. Right. So I think sometimes we even have to go through our own, like we know kind of what we're good at, but we have to really go through the exercise of what is it I can play. The commercial team was like, they have to have 15 or more employees. It's blue collar, it's construction, electrical, HVAC is our specialty. Like they had a whole lot of details of revenue and comp scores and all these things of what they were looking for. And commercial was blowing it out of the water and personal lines was struggling. But it was because the commercial team, without knowing it, was like, this is what's hot. This is what we have 2 or 3 markets for. This is what we can place. And I think that's really what it comes down to is the producers being able to adapt to the marketplace. I'm working with a newer producer that's been licensed 2 months. Poor thing. Or great thing, right? 2 months. Like, brand new license, brand into an insurance. He is crushing it. He is blowing all of the goals out of the water. He's writing more than the other producers. And it's because everybody is like, here's what you do. This is your little piece of the pie. This is all you focus on. And he's like, so if I want to make this amount of money, I have to write this. And they're like, yes, nothing else. You only get this little piece of the pie. And he's like, okay. And he's now out producing the seasoned producers because the seasoned producer out there just chasing random stuff. And he looked at the opportunity that they thought was a poor opportunity. And he's like, if I want a paycheck, this is what I do. And he's dialing for dollars and building relationships. And I think they started a Facebook page that he's starting to moderate. And they're coming up with some creative ways to fill that bucket and become a resource. So I think we just have to look at what are some new ways to do business, but still keep that personal touch.
Well, and I want to say this too. I think, in my mind, when you're in sales, your only job is to solve problems. Like if I solve people's problems, they're going to buy it from me. But you need to solve your own problems too, of lead generation and where the market is and how to break through and how to work with underwriters. So producers who weren't producing before, in my mind, have no shot, right? Like we're going to see like a reckoning of like these producers who really were needed to go no matter what, but now people really need to hold them accountable. And I think, I'm working with you guys, like we all have some in our book of non-producing producers that have just been there forever. And, oh, well, I'm now working on my renewal. Like, well, what was your excuse 3 years ago? I have your metrics from 3 years ago too. Were you working on a renewal then? Like, why don't you just be an account manager? And so I think everyone has to get a little bit like no excuses. Like the top salespeople I work with are looking at this and like salivating in this market because they know the bad agents are just going to try to like, okay, I'm just going to, do this. They're not out prospecting. And that they know that they can get in and wedge in even because the rates are going up. Maybe that producer is working on the renewal, but that other client is still taking other offers and saying, well, why don't you take a look at this? And if they can outsell them and outproduce them, like Bobby said it earlier, I still have a business to run. Your relationship is only as good as, it's not always as good as you think it is. And so I just think that everybody's got to start with the sales side and say, my job is to solve problems and the market problems are not going to be where I focus my time and energy on. I'm not going to be able to control them, but I can control how many conversations I have. I can control who I'm having conversations with, and I can put myself out there in a different way. And I think every producer out there should have that scarcity mentality of like, what if I can't put dinner on the table next month? What am I going to do right now to ensure I can put dinner on the table next month? And I think a lot of them don't have that mentality because they just had it so easy.
Yeah. And I think, this market is dovetailing, we were coming out of the COVID times and now we're coming into this market. And I think there was so much, oh, we can't go knock on doors or, go handshake because, I'm not allowed, or they have a no soliciting sign on their front door. And I think we need to break out of that mentality. I mean, from a sales perspective, we have to do things that made us successful to begin with. And those things were creating relationships, meeting people, helping educate people, being that trusted resource within my community. Continue to do those things. And if you weren't doing those things, you need to start doing those things. We all have 2 feet in a heartbeat. Get the heck
in a heartbeat. We need t-shirts, Bobby. 2 feet in a heartbeat.
Get your butt out of your chair and on the street.
Well, and this is where I think like if you were used to just the referral game and everything else and you can hit your numbers, that's awesome. But for a lot of people, we're not in that bucket anymore. And I'm just going to say this as we kind of close down because we have to wrap up here, but hold yourself accountable. You're in sales. You're a producer. No one should have to drive you to go sell. You should be out there driven, wanting to kill and hunt and go find that next thing, not just for yourself, but for the whole agency that's losing policies because of rate and because of competition. Like you should be the quarterback of that whole offense, like leading the team and championing everybody and being pumped and positive. And when producers come in and they get negative and they start blaming everybody and throwing everybody on the bus, it just causes chaos. It diverts everybody from their actual mission. And what they need to do is stay on track and on target and say, hey, you know what? I need to step up my sales game because in this hard market, we are probably going to lose some extra clients. So I'm going to put that on me to go out there and double down for my team right now. Just like
Yeah.
in other markets, they've covered my back so I can go service. So they're servicing so I can go sell. Like, take it on yourself to not be a victim of this market, because every producer I know that's a victim is not actually producing. Like, don't call yourself a producer, and I just think that, this market can be a dark place. You have to keep every day, like, listen, I'm still old school, right? Like, I still believe in the windshield time of like popping on the motivational podcast, like doing everything in your power to get one little tip that why you should walk into a prospect office and knock on that door and introduce yourself with positivity and excitement, and not walk in like, oh, another person just want to talk about insurance. Well, yeah, if you walked into an office and said, could I talk to you about insurance? I'm going to say no. If you walk in and say, hey, I insure a couple of these buildings and I thought I'd introduce myself because most of the clients I heard in this building, their insurance rates are going up. And I thought you might need some help. So I wanted to say hi and see if I could help you. Probably be like, oh, sounds nice. So keep focused on the fact that just because it's a hard market, it is not an excuse to not write business. So thank you guys, everybody. Tune in for our next topic on hard market insurance burnout. And if you need any help with this topic, check out our hard market course. We can do it live with your team. We can come out for a training day. We got all sorts of options. So we want to help there be a resource for all of you guys to get through year 2 of the market, not the hard market, the market.
Well, I hope all of our ridiculously amazing insurance agent friends out there picked up some strategies on how you need to sell. Just because it's a hard market does not mean that we give up and we say, oh, it's a hard market, we must be there. No. Does it make things easier? No. Does it mean that we sit and wait? No. You have to come up with a new strategy to go ahead and invest in your sales growth. So take a look at that podcast. I think there's so many gems in there that you can utilize. And of course, maybe you need to think about your sales process. Maybe you need sales coaching and training. Think of APP. We've got all that right for you.